Today I want to address a topic that has been requested by a lot of people, and a lot of young musicians specifically. This is a topic that is highly requested in DMs, in the background, not on comments, and that's for a reason. It's what to do and how to understand when a teacher, a private lesson teacher, a mentor, or your university professor, your main teacher, is discouraging to you. And this is a really painful experience, and it is unfortunately a pretty universal one among musicians. My name is Chelsea Tanner. I am a flutist and a mindset coach for musicians, and I have a unique perspective on this because I don't just teach flute lessons, and I haven't just been taught flute lessons. I'm also a coach that helps musicians move past roadblocks, ones just like this, when maybe you've gotten some feedback or your teacher has said something to you that is discouraging, that is maybe negatively motivating. No matter what their intention is, I want to break down this process, how we understand each other from a mindset perspective. So if you're a student and you've gone through this, you can move past it and you can gain your power back. And if you're a teacher, how to understand and own some of the communication that has happened, but then also how to be a little bit more care-filled in your approach to giving students feedback, and perhaps maybe considering whether we should judge if a student should be doing something or not, and whether to tell them, and how you can maybe restructure a little bit of feedback and pedagogy in your own practice. Let's talk about teachers. Many private teachers are not trained in teaching. Many private teachers are trained in playing their instrument. Pedagogy is a separate art. To me, it is a separate art form. It is its own thing. I love teaching. I love thinking about the process of learning. I love thinking about how I can shape this curriculum to fit each individual student. And I think that sometimes we tell students that they can always teach private lessons as a means for income. And a lot of people want to learn from the top performers, and a lot of those top performers teach at really big name schools. But those performers are not taught how to teach. A lot of times they take what works for them and they give it to their students. And that is what their students are coming there for, right? But is it always best for the student? Not necessarily. And it can be hard to navigate this relationship between teacher and student. Where I see this show up so often is a teacher's desire to motivate their students. And sometimes this is done through negativity. And there's a reason for that. It gets results a lot of the time. If you put your student down, say they're not doing enough, that they have to practice more, that they have to be more dedicated, that they're not dedicated enough. Or if you say, oh, you're never gonna make it if you XYZ. All of these kinds of feedback are negative motivation. What this does is it asks the student to believe in themselves to prove the teacher wrong, right? You're trying to prove the teacher wrong. I've actually had clients come to me and say, yeah, my professor last week said, and this is why you'll never get a job. And to hear that from a mentor, no matter what their motivation is pretty harsh. And what we're asking students to do is to believe in themselves more than they trust their teacher, which inherently breaks trust between the student and the teacher. And that trust is so important. On a human level, it's so important. But on a pedagogical level, not being able to trust your teacher has your best interest is extraordinarily damaging. But I will say, most teachers do not go into lessons thinking, how can I destroy and tear down my students? Most of them have the student's best interest in mind. When they resort to very harsh criticism or other suggestions, whatever they might be, they're probably ill-equipped to deal with the situation at hand. That is what I've landed on in my perspective, both as a student who's experienced something like this and as a teacher. And it reminds me of a story of a prominent flutist I was talking to once, and they said that they had a student who seemed like they were not enjoying flute anymore. They seemed so miserable in what they were doing. They were so hard on themselves. And this teacher made a suggestion that the student would probably be really good at flute repair, that this student would be really good at that with their skill set, the way their mind works. And this teacher sincerely meant it because they wanted relief for the student. They didn't want the student to suffer. And I had to chime in and say, you know, as someone who was told that this career path might not be possible for me, this student probably took that to mean that they aren't good enough, or that their teacher doesn't think they're good enough to succeed in the thing that they're pursuing. And that is such a miscommunication. I, as a student, have been guilty of this so much, where I used to make my teacher's feedback mean that I wasn't good enough, because that's the belief I had cultivated and developed. But I didn't have the skills or tools to realize that as a student. And it wasn't until after I got out of school, I was able to reflect back and say, it wasn't necessarily what they were saying that made me feel not good enough. It was my interpretation of it. And I think a lot of miscommunication happens this way. That isn't to say that there aren't just teachers who are not careful. That totally happens too. But I want to talk about how students can take their power back and empower themselves regardless of any feedback they've been given by a teacher. One thing I see a lot when it comes to students approaching lessons is they're using their lessons as a way for validation. Now, of course, we want to make sure we're doing things correctly, right? We're getting a grade for our lessons. But when we go into our lesson thinking that if I have a good lesson, it means my teacher will have nothing to say, we've already lost. Because that teacher's job, what they are paid to do, is to give feedback, is to come up with something to say, or else they think they're not doing their job. So anytime you go into a lesson and think, well, if I was doing everything right, then they'd have nothing to say, that's completely untrue. They have to look for things to say. That's literally their job. And anytime we make feedback in general mean that we're doing something wrong, we're not doing anything wrong. It's just that we're using the lesson in the wrong way. This is the first thing to check for if you're a student. Are you looking to get validation from your teacher, or are you looking to co-create with them? So you can both hear through their ears, take their feedback into account, and then mix it with your own ideas and create something that you really love, that you're proud of. Because at the end of the day, it is your playing, and you don't have to do everything your teacher says. This dynamic of seeking validation in lessons can leave students feeling really disempowered and rejected because it presupposes that they shouldn't have anything wrong with their playing when they go into a lesson. They shouldn't need feedback. I don't know where we got that, but a lot of people I talk to have this idea. So what we want to do, instead of just taking everything our teacher says as the truth and everything that is right about whatever you do and your career and all of that, we want to create sort of a sneeze guard. One of my clients called it a sneeze guard. You can see the feedback coming in and then take what you want and apply it. And maybe you won't be ready to apply everything at that moment. As you become a new person and a new player, months, years down the road, then you can say, oh my gosh, that's what they meant by this. I still do that with my teachers. And one exercise to help with this is what I call the box of neutrality. I write down on a piece of paper, just a box. And everything inside that box is going to be a neutral fact. It is teacher said words to me, or it's a literal quote, okay? That goes in the box. Everything around the box is a thought. And when you look at all of the thoughts that you have about that quote or about the fact that your teacher said words to you, then you get to see how your brain is working and operating and what it's making it mean about you. And those thoughts are usually projected onto the teacher, right? Those thoughts are ours though. We need to take ownership of them. So, for example, if a teacher said something like, you'll never make it unless you practice 3 to 4 hours a day. If that's a quote, then around the box it could be, oh my gosh, they don't think I'm good enough. I'm not practicing enough, something like that, which is so common for our brains to jump to. And this is not so you can judge yourself further for having thoughts. This is just an awareness tool for you to see how your brain is responding to any given feedback. Then you can decide whether you want to keep those thoughts or not. You can decide, do I want to keep thinking I'm not good enough even though my teacher said this? Do I want to keep thinking that I don't practice enough even though my teacher said this? Because I don't practice enough is negative motivation. You can keep it if you want to, but go watch the Not Good Enough Complex video if you want to hear more about why negative motivation will tank your confidence and lead to imposter syndrome. And really think about it. Is the teacher's feedback going to be contributing to your dreams? Or is it advice that doesn't feel right to you and something that you can respectfully decline? You don't have to do everything your teacher says always. And I really think it's crucial for you to take ownership of your own playing and of your own career and how you operate within that. So if you want to become an orchestral musician, for example, or anything at all, maybe you want to be a content creator as a classical musician, and then maybe your teacher rolls their eyes at that, or maybe they don't take you seriously, or they suggest something that's not on the same path that really resonates with where you want to be. You can express that, and you can also choose your own path, because after all, you have agency here. As you're doing this box of neutrality exercise, think about how you are interpreting this advice and how it's influencing how you view yourself, your ability, and your potential. If you are using any feedback to discourage yourself or as a reason why you're not capable or not able, this is where we want to shift gears, because you have the power to choose differently. It can sting, it can hurt to hear feedback, of course, but if you keep playing that feedback over and over in your head for years, then it is no longer the responsibility of the teacher. That is your voice. That is your brain saying that story over and over again. And that can be a little hard to hear. And it does sometimes take years to get over some things that were said in lessons. It can happen in a moment. But when you tell it to yourself back every single day, you have to take ownership of that, because that's the only way you're going to move past it. So whenever that thought comes up, my teacher told me I wasn't good enough to make it in music. Okay, do you still want to believe that? It's up to you. I don't want to downplay this. It is a big thing to not believe your teacher. And it can be really easy to use this incident as fuel to prove yourself to them. But I want to offer that instead of using that as motivation, that you choose yourself and act in integrity with yourself and honor yourself by choosing a different path and not choosing a different path to prove yourself or prove them wrong. This is a slight distinction and it happens internally, but it is so important that you are choosing a different path because you are valuing yourself, not because you want the other person to be wrong. Now, I wanted to speak about this topic because I have not met a classically trained musician who has not gone through something like this. And I wanted to speak to the nuance of the situation. When we hear feedback, we are never getting the entire story. When we say feedback, we are never able to know how the student's going to take that. And I'm sure that I have said some things in my own teaching that I would want to take back, that I wouldn't want a student to take a certain way. But I can't help that either. This is not a perfect science. No one can perfectly give and receive feedback always to every other single person, because everyone's interpretation is different of words. Everything is different. All we can do is equip ourselves with tools to understand our students as teachers, and as students, go in with a mentality of wanting to learn and not wanting to be validated. That's a huge difference. At the end of the day, you get to choose what is true for you. You get to be the one that decides whether you're good enough at your instrument, whether you're going to make it or not. Because If you don't, you are outsourcing your validation and your career path to someone who does not know what's best for you. They know what's best for them. You know what's best for you. And I am skeptical of any teacher who says they think they know what's best for their students, because we can't know what's best for anyone else. When I teach, the approach that I try to take is I believe in my students unconditionally. I know that they know what's best for them, and that could change at any time. But I am on board 100% no matter what. If you say you have a goal, I'm gonna help get you there. That's how I operate as a coach and as a teacher. And I do that because I know what it's like to have people not believe in you and not believe in your vision. And I don't know, anyone watching this, just know that I'm behind you all the way. And it can be hard to navigate. Sending you so much love. I hope this resonated, but in some ways I hope it doesn't. And I will see you next time.